and welcome back to Gay by Gay. My name is Adam.
I'm JJ.
And today we are going to be talking about relationships. Do you want to be in a relationship?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm 31 now, and I'm becoming more insecure about being single. The problem is that you start to think about, like, where you should be if your life is to progress in the proper way. So, like, if I'm, like, to say, have children someday, which, you know, theoretically I'd say I'm open to, but then you think, like, okay, well, I'd have to, like, meet a guy, and I'd have to, like, you know, form a long-term relationship, then we'd have to, like, you know, get married and live together, and, like, at what phase of life would we be in then to have children at a reasonable age?
As gay men, you kind of get to start from whatever you want. So to define gay relationships by straight standards is doing that, right? Is doing what all my straight friends are doing, which is like buy this thing that coordinates with how long women can have children for, and then you work backwards from there. No, none of that. Erase that whole thing, and you get to start from nothing and just do whatever you want. We're reaching a point where you can be defined as asexual or as whatever.
Demisexual, I learned earlier today is a thing.
Is that like Lovato-sexual?
I don't know what that means.
I've lost track of the amount of terms that there are as far as like pansexual and omnisexual and bis, all these things, but it's kind of cool that you can now have this glossary of terms and be like, oh, that is me. To be able to get close to a point where there's no expectation and you just do what makes you feel happy. If that's being demisexual, then awesome. But if it's being slutty, great, do that. If it makes you feel good, you shake your head.
You can't just do whatever you want all the time.
Why not?
Because you have to be we have a civilization and it requires certain standards of behavior and certain standards of social decorum.
How would that fall apart if some people were slutty?
We don't have discipline in our lives simply because some sort of stern authority figure has oppressed us and is telling us to do. Mm-hmm. We have discipline in our lives because we've realized through centuries of human development that some patterns of behavior are ultimately more productive in the long term than other ones. Like, for instance, we know that a child is better raised if their parents are married when they have the child than if they're, having a single mother all by herself. Like, there are certain things that can be empirically measured that are better than others in terms of lifestyles. And when I think about why I want to be in a relationship, it's because I feel like it would be psychologically best for myself in the long term if I could be in that kind of stable situation.
But you have to understand that that's how you define it, right? And you're seeking that out, I think maybe because of what you see as a healthy standard based on models that you've seen work in the past for people that you're close to. To take, for example, the pocket demographic of gay men living in a certain area of Vancouver that have chosen, instead of wanting to be in long-term relationships, to have a series of one-night stands, say. What is detrimental to society about that?
That those people would probably not grow up to be very happy or satisfied.
I think you're making sweeping assumptions.
Well, I mean,
because I don't think that's true at all.
That's kind of an immature lifestyle, I think, and I think that maturity has some values, and discipline and self-control has positive attributes as well.
But I think that there's a lot of judgment there, where there's also...
welcome to me, JJ.
Well, isn't there an argument to be said as far as maturity goes and sexual habits that the person who gets beyond the idea of traditional relationships and monogamy and is able to get all of the positive things out of a relationship from friendships and from family and separate that from their sexual habits, isn't that a sign of increased maturity and being evolved past the point of traditional marriage, which in the grand scheme of the world is a pretty recent evolution?
You're sort of suggesting that people can sort of compartmentalize
their
relationships
I know
in
people
that kind of way?
Like someone who's asexual.
Yeah.
What do they do? That doesn't mean they're unhappy. It just means that they don't find sex to be gratifying in the same way that you or I do.
Yeah, well, I think that we should, emphasize the model that we know works for the majority of people and not be ashamed of saying that this is a model that works for the majority of people, and it's probably the one you should aspire to because everything we know about how humans reach happiness and satisfaction in their lives is based on that.
I think there's a flaw in what you're saying. Don't you think that the studies that say that these monogamous relationships end up with people who are more balanced and happier, because we as a society are holding people to this standard, like we're saying, well, I have to be in a relationship by the time I'm 25, and I better be married when I'm 30 because I want to have kids when I'm all of these things. If you don't feel that within yourself, part of that unhappiness comes from the fact that you are starting to identify that you then can't adhere to that standard. It's part of the reason why, for a long time, people who are identifying as gay were depressed because the standard was, I better meet a wife When I was identifying that myself, where I was like, well, I want a wife. Of course I was sad. So going forward, to be able to tell the next generation, you can define it however you want. And it doesn't mean you're going to be sad or happy or whatever. You get to start from scratch. Isn't that wonderful?
The problem that people like me, like sort of conservative, judgmental people, get into is that it becomes very difficult to talk about these sorts of issues without it sounding like you're judging people as individuals, right? We have a lot of evidence suggesting that certain models of relationships, statistically speaking, are more likely to yield positive results for the most number of people. It sort of behooves us as a society to encourage people to do what we know works rather than to put themselves into high-risk positions. It's just like anything else.
But high risk, what is the consequence? To me, it sounds like you are wanting to judge the individual, but you're covering it up by being under the guise of being concerned for society. What is the result? You really think this is going to turn into this Sodom and Gomorrah orgy?
I think it behooves us as a society to try to gently push people on the path to making good decisions so they can maximize their own happiness, which then maximizes the happiness of society as a whole. That is basically where I come.
That is terrifying.
That is my philosophy.
What do we take away from this discussion?
I don't know. Have we resolved anything, Adam?
No, but I think it's an interesting thing. Our decisions in our relationships should ultimately be ours. What freaks me out about some of the things you say is I don't understand how it's anyone else's business.
If a lot of other people are doing something, they're probably doing it for a reason. And I think that sometimes it's worthwhile, rather than to just think that you've figured it all out, to maybe sort of be a little bit humble and look at the experiences of others and think, what can you learn from them, rather than having your only standard of judgment.
But you're claiming you figured it all out.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that
I'm not claiming I figured it all out. I'm the one saying, hey, do what feels right. You're the one saying, no, we figured it out. There's studies.
Well, no, I think that in some respects we're both kind of saying the same thing, which is to just sort of like look around you, make observations based on what you see.
And ultimately do what makes you happy.